When asking for a TV show recommendation, 9 times out of 10 you will be recommended Breaking Bad, and for good reason. Breaking Bad has won many awards and has been heralded as one of the greatest TV shows ever, and manages to pull on every single heartstring in the human body. In this video, we will be delving into the complex and often disturbing world of Jesse Pinkman and the numerous ways he's manipulated throughout the hit TV show. From the moments of exploitation by his former teacher turned drug lord boss Walter White to the false helping hands of his dealers and enemies, Jesse's journey is a testament to the power of manipulation when used on someone vulnerable and the toll it can take on said individual. So sit back, grab a box of tissues, and get ready to uncover the many ways Jesse Pinkman is manipulated in Breaking Bad.
Power is the currency of every relationship. From friendship to romantic pursuits, power dictates the control and extent of what happens in the given relationship. However, the harsh reality of the world is that not all people exert the same power onto each other, resulting in the realistic day-to-day dynamics between interactions. By understanding this idea, fictional works are able to elevate themselves to be figments of the real world. No show accomplishes this to the level in which Breaking Bad explores the manipulative power dynamics of Jesse Pinkman. For the unacquainted, Breaking Bad is a crime drama television series that follows the transformation of a high school chemistry teacher, Walter White, into a ruthless methamphetamine producer. After being diagnosed with terminal cancer, Walter teams up with a former student, Jesse Pinkman, to cook and sell meth in order to secure his family's financial future. As the duo navigate the dangerous world of drug production and distribution, they must also grapple with the consequences of their actions and the threat of rival drug lords. Breaking Bad explores themes of morality, family, and power, while delivering tense and thought-provoking television. As Breaking Bad progresses, Walter's descent into a life of crime becomes increasingly difficult to reverse. With each decision, he spirals further down the rabbit hole, until he reaches a point where his actions become those of a true sociopath. However, despite his increasingly immoral behavior, Walter is still driven by a desire to protect himself and his family. To this end, he begins to manipulate Jesse more and more, using his former student's loyalty and trust to keep him by his side and ensure his continued survival. As Walter's hold over Jesse grows stronger, the audience is left to question the limits of manipulation and the toll it takes on those who are controlled. Now that you've been refamiliarized with the plot, let's take a specific look at the characters and analyze their roles in the manipulative scenarios that transpire throughout Breaking Bad.
To start with, Jesse Pinkman has proven again and again that he's extremely more deep than watchers initially give him credit for. At first, we are led to believe that he is simply a junkie loser that lacked morals and could only make a living making meth. However, we are then turned into spectators of a truly tragic and depressing story of a lonely boy that was never truly given the proper love and attention to transform into the caring and functional adult he should have been. We see the passion for craftsmanship that he had, and the love and drive in his eyes when he would talk about his former escapade, proving that he had real dreams, just like you and me. We also see how emotional Jesse is, and how he still maintains certain principles in the world of drug dealing. An example of this is how Jesse tends to the kid in the crack house, perhaps seeing himself in that kid, and also Jesse's advocacy against children in drug dealings. However, we are also shown how little affection and love Jesse receives from the people that are supposed to help him in dark times. When Jesse went down the path of drug dealing and addiction, his parents simply gave up and never tried to get their son back, showing us what being truly alone does to a person. Jesse then develops a habit of latching onto people that show him even the tiniest bit of affection, as a sort of way to cope with the lack of real love he receives. He also becomes extremely loyal in these relationships, as he knows what it's like to be hurt and refuses to do that to anyone else. This makes him extremely easy to manipulate, as in exchange for just a small amount of affection, you will receive a loyal and willing servant. People that take advantage of this are obviously ones that seem to be Jesse's enemies, like Gus and Hank, but also people that appear to be his closest friends, like, as we all know already, Walter White.
From understanding Jesse, the deuteragonist of the story, it must be understood that none of this development and understanding of the character could not be accomplished without the actions taken both physically and psychologically by his trusted mentor, friend, but more significantly, his abuser, Walter White. Walter White, as you might understand, is the main character of the show. And the show completely revolves around his life and how he becomes more entrenched in the criminal world. But with all things being considered, the story is not about his work in the criminal world, but is rather about the ego and change in character that takes place rapidly to not only his actions but motives. The reason why this shift in character works so well is that we are introduced to Walter White as a husk of a man, an innocent man that seems detached from the world with a lack of actual enjoyable life experiences. Walter is presented as the modern, hard-working man living in suburbia. Yet under all this, Breaking Bad shows how these types of men are susceptible to the greatest amount of change within their lives due to the fragility of having nothing. All in all, Walter's future actions and motives stem from a place of insecurity and constant emasculation. To put it simply, in the pilot of the show, we see how Walter sees himself as an unpopular or unidealized man. He is a very normal high school chemistry teacher, working in a public institution with a nuclear household, living in the suburbs of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Furthermore, on Walter's birthday, and progressively throughout the story, we even see how his own son, Walter Jr., respects and sees his own uncle, Hank Schrader, as more of a man and a better role model than his own father. This awkward tension with Walter realizing that his own son seems to look up to another man and recognize his achievements shows Walter's underlying craving for recognition, appreciation, and someone he can mold or be a greater influence to. Now, all this culminates into is Walter's relationship with his former student, Jesse Pinkman.
When we start the series, the audience is tricked into a false understanding of the predicaments between Walter and Jesse's relationship. After hearing about Walter's cancer diagnosis, we subconsciously look at Walter as an even weaker man, crippled by disease with little time left to live. In doing so, when Walter reaches out to his junkie former student to form a business relationship, we are lulled into believing that Jesse will be the one to have the power and that Walter will be abused by this out-of-control junkie dealer. However, the show does a great job of showing us how unpredictably sweet and emotional Jesse's mind is, while also showing us how sick and manipulative the once thought to be innocent Walter White can become. By pushing the barrier for character progression, the story has Walter attempt to control Jesse to not only take control of his life, but also become the fully idealized version of himself that he has always wanted to be.
Walter's manipulation is all the more a dominant theme due to its unnecessary nature. To begin, Walter clearly identifies Jesse as someone who is incompetent when it comes to the drug manufacturing process. Walter constantly berates Jesse for being a drug addict and consistently argues and illustrates that he provides no real inherent value to their meth operation, other than his quote-unquote understanding of the drug game. Firstly, the reason why Walter pursuing Jesse due to his understanding of the drug game should be immediately rejected as the basis of the relationship is mainly because of Walter's ego. As we see time and time again, Walter's ego is his fatal flaw. This is evidently seen when Walter backs away from Gray Matter Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar company within the world of the story. The reason for backing away from this company and selling his share for a fraction of its current day cost? A tumultuous end to a relationship. By contrasting the life that Walter could have had if he decided to detach his personal feelings from the objective happenings of his work to the one that he is currently living in due to him being unable to work past interpersonal issues goes to show the extent of his destructive ego. Coupled with Elliot and Gretchen's successful lives after taking control of the company, in contrast to Walt's mundane life as a teacher, only furthers how strong his ego plays into the decisions he makes, subliminally contradicting our initial thoughts on Walter being a rational and objective thinking person. Adding insult to injury when Elliot and Gretchen offer financial assistance to cover the cost of Walter's medical expenses, we truly see the ego of this man as he rejects it. In essence, these subtle first couple of scenes lay the groundwork as to who Walter is, a man of principle, even if it means it induces greater risk to himself and those he loves.
Fueling his ego, Walter pursues his partnership with Jesse as not for the business, but to build his so-called empire. Walter wants Jesse around to feel as though he's still a good person, that he is changing lives, being a role model, being a better partner, and most importantly, a good man. An empire is something that is often connotated with powerful families, and in a twisted way, Walter rejects his own actual family to build a familial bond with Jesse, one of the only people throughout his whole life that has made him feel as though he is being an influence. Jesse's innocence and naivety helped Walter feel more secure in their partnership, getting that respect and attention for his knowledge of science and business as a whole. By finally feeling appreciated for his talents, Walter has intoxicated himself into believing that he needs Jesse around as he builds his ego by being a smarter and more capable role model. The aspect of manipulation which is not discussed enough between this toxic relationship is that as Jesse and Walter go deeper into the drug business, Jesse finds himself in more situations that Walter's created for the two of them, essentially becoming trapped in this endless loop of being bonded to Walter by the problems Walter himself creates and then solves. But due to Jesse's naivety and innocence, he believes he is in debt to Walter, and Jesse's own lack of self-confidence and lack of role models leads him into craving Walter's approval and company. The truly shocking part of all of this is that Walter recognizes this cycle and goes out of his way to exploit it, making him the true manipulator of Jesse, an abuser that sees no ends. All of this is elegantly represented constantly through the story of Breaking Bad, some examples being the poisoning of Brock, the murder of Gail, and the death of Jane.
A specific instance of Walter emotionally manipulating and using Jesse for his own gain is the poisoning of Brock. This is an interesting example, as Walter does it out of necessity to keep himself alive. He recognized that Jesse was getting closer with Gus, and that would eventually lead to Walter's end in the industry. Therefore, it is possible to consider this as an extremely intelligent, tactical move, rather than a sociopathic display of manipulation. However, we'd like to consider it as both. While it does seem like an extremely logical move, that is exactly what it is, extremely logical. There is not much emotion put into the reasoning of this, as Walter must terrify Jesse into thinking his own involvement in the meth game led to Brock's poisoning, which is extremely unfair to put on a person. He then completely twists the situation that he himself fabricated around to make it appear as if Gus poisoned Brock, essentially acting as Jesse's puppet master. He is able to successfully bring Jesse back to his side by completely toying with what he knows as one of Jesse's weakness, which is his sensitivity towards children. We also see Walter manipulate Jesse into breaking up with Andrea, by convincing him that his involvement in the meth business poses a danger to Andrea and Brock, and because of these previous incidents that Walter created himself, Jesse listens to him and loses someone else he loves due to Walter's manipulation.
Another way Walter maintains his firm grip and control on Jesse's mind is when he allows Jane to die. Jane was Jesse's first love, something extremely precious to a person. Love is an emotion that makes people feel extremely emotionally vulnerable, leading to people opening themselves up to levels they never thought they could. Jesse's inexperience in youth obviously led him to be completely infatuated with Jane, and he would take her opinions very strongly. Walter recognized this and realized that it was acting as another voice influencing Jesse's decision, which threatens Walter's complete control over Jesse. For example, Jane convinced Jesse to run away and take hard drugs, which severely affected Walter and Jesse's business. Since Walter realized he no longer had complete control over Jesse because Jane started acting as an influence, he allowed Jane to die from overdose while being completely able to save her. This eliminates Jane as a threat towards his power dynamic with Jesse. He then consoles Jesse to make himself look trustworthy and caring, which leads up to a buildup of trust that Walter knows he can use to his advantage later.
An interesting way Walter manipulates Jesse is by referring to their business affairs with each other as a partnership, rather than a cook and assistant cook relationship. Clearly seen in the first couple of seasons of the show, Walter is obviously committed to this business, and we can see this by Walter taking the work a lot more seriously compared to Jesse. This in turn creates the aforementioned toxic dependence on each other, and only further solidifies the idea in which Walter White does not necessarily need Jesse, but plays into the idea of being partners when in reality Walter wants and will continue to see Jesse as a subordinate that he can take advantage of. Moreover, this notion is only accentuated with the infamous Say My Name scene. Within the parameters of this scene, see how Walter tries to paint Jesse as his equal in an attempt to validate Jesse enough to stick along with Walter in the business. Although Jesse is played up to be a partner to Walter, he in Walter's mind is nothing in comparison to the great Heisenberg, which only induces Jesse to idolize Walter and remain dependent to him. On Walter's end, when Walter tells Jesse there is a job opening for their operation, Jesse quickly declines, but Walter, who sees Jesse as more than just a partner, but also someone in which he exploits to boost his own self-confidence, is quick to change his offer, offering Jesse a partnership. With a need to be accompanied by Jesse, another manipulation method that Walter employs is the complementing of Jesse's work. Jesse has previously been characterized as someone who has not seen their full potential, mainly because of those around him not instilling with him the confidence that he needed at an early age in what he enjoyed, which only led him to covet it from others, including those who did not have the best of intentions for him, such as Walter White.
We see the effects of how much of a grip Walter had on Jesse in many instances. When Walter convinces Jesse to murder Gail, we see Jesse's crying and how powerfully Aaron Paul is able to convey how emotionally distressed and traumatized Jesse is from this incident. Most other deaths he can excuse, as the people they've killed were usually bad people. However, Gail was quite a nice, awkward guy who didn't even want Jesse nor Walter to die. It was simply a selfish act to keep Walter alive in exchange for the life of another man. We also see Jesse's many breakdowns as a result of the abuse Walter puts him through. After finding out Walter lied about poisoning Brock, Jesse completely breaks down and attempts to burn his whole house down. We then see him sob and scream he can't keep getting away with this, referring to Walter's constant tricks and manipulation tactics. Jesse realizes he's getting manipulated over and over again, hoping that Walter is finally punished for this. At the end of the show, we see Jesse drive away from Jack's house, and we see him scream over the radio in the car. Jesse finally gets to release the emotions he had to build up in the course of his relationship with Walt, and it is quite a sad and satisfying scene to see Jesse finally freed from the clutches of his once puppet master.
However, even with how Walter completely manipulated and controlled Jesse, is it possible he still cared for him? This is what is so amazing about their relationship. It is ever changing and evolving. Walter does a lot of what he does for the ultimate greater good for both him and Jesse, as he always brings Jesse along with him and will not let him die. This makes it extremely interesting to watch, as our opinions of their relationship constantly switch and keep the show extremely engaging.
Interestingly, Walter wasn't the only one who took advantage of Jesse's emotional naivety. Gus also recognized Jesse's malleability and used it to bring Jesse to his side in hopes of replacing Walter and convincing Jesse to be the main cook in place of Walt. Gus needed Jesse after Gail's death, which is a common theme that props up when it comes to Jesse. He is only wanted when he is needed. Gus brings Jesse along on certain missions to make him feel included and important, something Walter failed to do at times as he would often insult Jesse's skills. Gus actually staged a robbery for Jesse to stop in order to make Jesse feel important and validated, which motivated Jesse to take his role in the business more seriously. This also made him associate this happy and fulfilled feeling with working with Gus as opposed to working with Walter, effectively manipulating Jesse into thinking that he is better off with Gus.
Some other notable people Walter manipulated were Gail and Hank. Walter would gaslight Gail into thinking the batches he cooked were bad, even though Gail was simply following Walter's fake instructions. This gaslighting made Gail feel like a failure and demeaned, resulting in him not fighting back as hard, and eventually resulting in Jesse coming back as a cook. He also manipulated Hank by using his personality against him. Hank is quite boastful and doesn't see Walter as someone who is capable of the things he himself is. Therefore, Walter is able to use this trait to his advantage and get away with things right under Hank's nose, even while telling him the truth. He also knows Hank is extremely protective of his family, and he gets out of a sticky situation where Jesse and him are trapped in an RV with Hank outside by calling Hank and telling him his wife has been injured. Hank is then forced to leave, and we see the effects it has on him, as he is completely emotionally distraught and beats Jesse to a pulp out of pure anger. We also see some smaller acts of manipulation, with one scene having Walter cry about his marriage, knowing Hank would leave out of discomfort, which would allow Walter to bug his computer. This demonstrates how good Walter is at identifying weak points in people's personalities and using them in ways to benefit him.
All in all, the power dynamics between Jesse Pinkman and the others in the show led to him constantly being manipulated by those who he thought wanted to have a friendly and professional relationship. In essence, a lot of Jesse's characteristics, such as his naivety, his more emotional outlook on life, and desire to be respected by others due to the trauma and lack of parental figures in his life, coupled with being constantly degraded and looked down upon for his past decisions, has led him to be vulnerable and susceptible to the mental and physical manipulation of those with both good intentions and bad intentions. In reality, a lot of the manipulation which Jesse endures is by consequence of a lack of self-awareness and confidence with himself by putting himself and surrounding himself in an environment which perpetuates a culture of mediocrity and cyclical behavior. But at the same time, the show and Gilligan begs the question, How easy is it to escape this cycle? Jesse may be addicted to drugs, but at the end of the day, just like everyone else in the world, Jesse is a bigger addict for the affection, respect, and validation of others. He doesn't deserve to be such a pawn in the intense and heartbreaking chess game that is Breaking Bad.
Thank you for watching our video if you made it this far. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed it, as it really helps us and will notify you of our next uploads. We hope to see you all again. Thank you.